Welcome to Astrology Investigates. This is Ms. Jenny with Primal Girl Wellness and Down to Earth Astrology. And today we are looking at the mystifying marriage of Virginia and Clarence Thomas. And just so we're clear, this is Virginia Thomas and this is her husband, Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas. Virginia is a MAGA supporter and patroness. Virginia is apparently involved in multiple, I repeat, multiple extreme right-wing organizations that are primarily racist in their ideologies and honestly believe that everyone that's not white like them needs to leave, like get out of the country and let them have the country to themselves, or like be here but like stop complaining about people insulting you in the form of jokes and treating you like crap and all this sort of stuff. Just take what you get there, buddy. And this is her husband, Clarence Thomas, who clearly is exactly the thing that they're most not sympathetic to, and will be one of the first targets if their end days ever come about, as they keep trying to make happen. So he is literally married to a woman who's involved with organizations that would literally paint a bullseye on his forehead the first chance they get. Go figure. Go figure. So the question on all of our minds at this point, now that we're aware of this, is why are these two married? What the hell, man? And if you think you're a little confused now, oh, wait until we get the rest of this. So hopefully, astrology will help make this make sense. Okay, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is the chart of Clarence Thomas. He is a Supreme Court judge currently sitting on the bench with a lifetime appointment. Now, what is notable about him is actually part of his history. So aside from him being an incredibly conservative and regressive judge who's very anti-women's rights, anti-feminist, very anti-equal opportunity, like just the whole gamut, is back in the early 90s on the very precipice of being confirmed as a Supreme Court judge after George W. Bush's nomination of him. He was slapped with accusations of sexual harassment by a woman who had worked with him in when he was in a different position with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that was Anita Hill. So the Anita Hill case with Clarence Thomas was an extremely big deal because this sparked a very big and important conversation about what sexual harassment was inside a workplace, and also what legal recourses people had, not just women, men or women, had when they were sexually harassed. Mr. Thomas was accused of, now understand, we're not talking sexual harassment like he was, flirting with her or saying, oh, that's a nice blouse, or hey, your hair looks nice. None of that. No. What he's accused of, and if any of you young ladies or older women, but certainly younger ones, I'm sure I've had to deal with this, have had employers who have spoken in graphic detail about their sexual preferences or fantasies or anything that has to do with their sex or their genitalia or yours, or showed you dirty pictures, or, all of these things are wildly inappropriate, even if you were just dating somebody, right? But now, like, this is a power differential where you really don't have a lot of say in the matter because you need your job. That's what we're talking about with Clarence Thomas and what he was accused of. So apparently he was accused of not only, without invitation, going into graphic detail about his sexual fantasies and what he liked and what about you and yada, 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 while on the job with a woman who did not ask to have this conversation. He is also accused of showing her porn on his computer and making remarks about her body. And yeah, it was a big deal. So if you have some time, go back and look at the history of that case because it's fascinating. Fascinating. Okay. But let's put that aside. I just want to put that out there because it's a very big and important, notable thing about Clarence Thomas. And let's take a look at Clarence as the person. So the first thing we're going to look at is Clarence is a Cancer. He's got Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Cancer. So no surprise there that he's got some very conservative and regressive ideas about how the world should work. Now, Cancer men, as a general rule of thumb, tend to be very old-fashioned and like really like family models, right? Old-fashioned family models, home, hearth, and all this sort of stuff. This does not make them all regressive cavemen. It's not. However, one of the things that's interesting to note is that he has Venus retrograde in Cancer, as well as Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So he's not, by his general nature, a very forward-thinking or progressive person. This is the last person you're going to see in a poly marriage. The fact that he's in an interracial relationship is pretty huge, but there are reasons for that, which we can get into in other parts. And some people, like myself, we all know what that was about. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. So now the other thing too is if you look, this Sun, Mercury, and Venus conjunction, this triple conjunction or stellium that he has, sits in that 6th house of service. So he is. There is a part of him that honestly and earnestly believes that he is here to serve, to try and make things better. Now, who he's making things better for, that's a whole other question. But there is that. The other thing is that when you've got this heavy emphasis in the 6th house, you either get someone who is very health conscious or has health issues, which makes them, health and fitness conscious, or you get people who are a little more compulsive, like OCD, obsessive compulsive about things, and there's a narrow limitation on what they can process. So they're very controlling of their environment. So I would expect him, with this 6th house emphasis in Cancer loading up in there, to be extremely controlling by nature and certainly very controlling of his environment, which is kind of interesting, right? Now, with that said, all of this quincunxes his moon in Aquarius. Now he has Capricorn rising. That moon sits in the 1st house. So this quincunx with these old-fashioned, conservative, regressive Cancer planets in the 6th house and that futuristic, progressive moon in Aquarius tends to be a little challenging. So one of the things that we can expect is a bit of discomfort or disconnect between these high-minded Aquarian ideals and humanitarian visions, because he likes to see himself as very humanitarian and very ahead of his time, on the edge of the future, sort of thing. But his essential nature is much more traditional and conservative and regressive and all the things that go with Cancer, right? Because they like it the old-fashioned way. Daddy leads, mom stays home, all this sort of stuff, which also brings up some interesting questions about these conservative guys and women and their roles in public life, because that totally flies in the face of the things that they say they believe in. But that's a separate conversation. So with that said, just looking at the planets alone, that is that's going to be a bit of a challenge for him. Now, interestingly, when we look at this, right, this moon in Aquarius is intercepted in the 1st house. And because we do have a time of birth for him, we do know this. We also know that his chart ruler is Saturn. With Capricorn rising, his chart ruler is Saturn. So before we go any further, here's a couple of things, right? Capricorn rises. He's got a heavy emphasis in Cancer with his personal planets. Right there is the whole paternus major, daddy in charge kind of mentality. The world must be run by men, and women are there to nurture and feed and, create comfort for us. Now, Saturn is his chart ruler. So Saturn in Leo, no less. Again, it's this whole thing about men in charge, daddy in charge. Man as the leader of home, hearth, family, in the world kind of thing. With him, because he's with his generation, he's got this Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So Pluto conjuncts his chart ruler, which further really intensifies and hardens, is a good word, really cements in those men in charge, men rule the world kind of mentality that you're going to get with Capricorn rising, Saturn in Leo, and all this Cancer stuff, especially with Venus in Cancer retrograde. So this is, you want to keep this in mind, because this is the essence of who he is. This is his general nature. Now, he does have that moon in that progressive, humanitarian, futuristic Aquarius, but the problem is it's intercepted, right? So he's not necessarily able to access that part of himself very well. And oftentimes, when you have an interception, the planet in interception can operate as a bit of a blind spot, or a point where you're not as self-aware as you could be. Now, mind you, many people walk around that have nothing intercepted and have so little self-awareness that my dog is much more self-conscious and enlightened and self-aware than they've ever been on any day of their life. So self-awareness is not something that comes naturally. But when a planet is intercepted, the self-awareness of the planet that is involved, so for instance him, um, operates in many ways like a blind spot. So oftentimes they'll trip into the experiences expressed by the planet, and not realize what's happening until they're there. So with the moon intercepted, regardless of sign, oftentimes you'll get people who are, well, their blind spot is their emotions, their emotional life. It's not that they're not emotional, but oftentimes with that interception, making that moon or the emotional functions a bit of a blind spot, they'll often find themselves having feelings and not realizing what's happening, right? These are people who will start crying and not understand why they're crying, or who'll get upset and they're not sure why they're upset, or they're getting anxious. There's all sorts of emotional reactions that will occur that they're not immediately able to connect to something that triggers it. That's the interception. So that's with the moon, and you take that with any other planet, the interception creates kind of like blinders or a blind spot around it. So with him, and remember, he's all this Cancer, that moon deposits all that Cancer and it's intercepted. So with him, there are a lot of challenges in being this emotionally comatose, right? Or unable to access your feelings, when so much of what you do is driven, by your feelings and your dreams of what the world is supposed to look like. Because with all that Cancer, he is absolutely driven by the mythos in his head of what the world is supposed to be and who he's supposed to be in it. The problem is his actual emotional network, all the things that drive his particular decisions on any given day, beyond the ideals here and these dreams and fantasies about what the world should be and he should be in it. With that moon intercepted, oftentimes these are irrational decisions that he doesn't realize are irrational, or how irrational they are, until much, much later in the game. This doesn't have to be a bad thing if you need to be in jobs where your emotions should be on very low simmer and not highly operative during your work, like, I don't know, bomb squad, hostage negotiation, high wire, performance in a circus, things that require your emotional responses to be muted. That intercepted moon is perfect, right? But in other situations where you're making decisions or you're taking actions that are feeling based, and your feelings could potentially impact or influence, because remember, he's got Mercury and Venus here in Cancer, both of them retrograde, could influence things, then it's more problematic. The fact that he's a Supreme Court judge, which means that all of his decisions about and values, Mercury and Venus retrograde both, this creates problems when you're making decisions that are not rational, because you don't even know really the truth about why you're making these decisions, because you're blind to your own emotional impetuses, right? Whee! Fun days, fun days. I'm only laughing because I'm scared to death. Okay, so some other interesting things about his chart. Now, he has Mars in Virgo, and he's got that 6th house emphasis in Cancer. Interestingly enough, with this heavy emphasis in the sign of service and servants, he is a follower, not a leader. In spite of the fact that with this ambitious Cancer Capricorn thing happening in the chart, he sees himself as a leader, a man among men, a leader among, the masses sort of thing. And certainly if you're a Supreme Court judge, you're definitely in a position of absolute power and leadership, because highest court in the land and nobody can police you, which is also something interesting that's come up recently because of all of this with his wife as well. And that is, who does the Supreme Court judge answer to when it comes to matters of ethics? Right? Because apparently nobody can touch them. They police themselves. Yeah, the police policing themselves. That's always worked well. So, in spite of all of that, he is still a follower, not a leader. He is a person who takes his marching orders from other people because that is how he operates best. He is here to do what needs to be done. He's not the person who makes the executive decisions, in spite of the fact that he sees himself that way. So that is something to keep in mind about him as well. Because he was appointed by the Bush administration, and there's been a long history with the conservative movement getting more conservative and more crazy and more regressive in really damaging ways to the point that we're at now, and the appointments that they've made. So I'm not going to lay this all at George Bush's feet, but I am going to say the Bush administration is part of a much longer chain of political influence that's been going on, that's brought things to where they're at, and they're still trying to push us to go. All right, now, sorry, we can't talk about one and not talk about the other. Okay, so the other thing that I thought was interesting is he's got Uranus here in Gemini, right, with a part of fortune. So this together, and it's in the 5th house, so this together should indicate a couple of things, and it's also, well, it's kind of a wide sextile, but we'll take it, right, and it's an opposition to Jupiter. So with this particular combination, you're going to get somebody who's creative. I would be very surprised if he's not artistic or creative in some way at home in his personal life. His son, he does have a son from his first marriage, because this is his second marriage to Virginia. His child should be very, very gifted in some way, and certainly should do good things in the world. I would be really surprised if his son didn't turn out to be the exact opposite of him and very ultra progressive, ultra liberal kind of thing. That would be interesting to see, wouldn't it? Like Anita Bryant. For those of you who don't know, Anita Bryant's from the 70s. She was a very big anti-gay advocate, and turned out one of her kids was gay. the irony. Okay, so Uranus sextile. It's a wide sextile, but it is a sextile to his chart ruler, right, in that 7th house. So this should also indicate, again, this sense of progressiveness. So in some way, somehow, he sees himself being the ultra-conservative as the progressive in the room, right? So somehow his conservative backward ideals and this regressive return to man on top, woman on bottom, daddy leads kind of thing, and, you know, man in charge of the world, absolutely. Women are just there to take care of the house. For whatever reason, he would see himself, knowing what we do about him, he would actually see himself as being very forward thinking in that way. That's pretty frightening. I do not understand that. Now, with Uranus opposing Jupiter like that, and here's what's interesting, because we only ever get to see him being a stuffy old judge, right? With Uranus opposed Jupiter, he should actually have a very fine sense of humor. He should actually be funny as all get out in his personal time. And with the chart ruler, Saturn, over here in Leo, here's what's interesting. So this combined with this, Saturn and Leo, you wouldn't think of Saturn or Capricorn rising as being funny or being a performer, but with this chart, with Saturn in the sign of Leo as the chart ruler, and this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at the 5th and the 11th, this guy has got to be quite the party animal and funny as all God knows what when he's not in his official duties. So it's an interesting contrast between what we see as the general public and who he probably is when he's away from the cameras, you know, or the court, public-facing court. So I thought that was interesting. Now, what's very important to note about his chart, and this is going to come into play especially this year because we're seeing it happen now. The North Node is in Taurus, right? But more importantly, the South Node is in Scorpio with Chiron. Now, this year, we've got Taurus-Scorpio eclipses happening, bang, 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 all year long, which means that he is getting hammered with these eclipses. Now, with the North Node in Taurus, your job here in this lifetime is not, as some would-be hack astrologers would say, oh, you just got to go out and make money. Yeah, no. With the North Node in Taurus, in this lifetime, one of your jobs is to work on your value system, right? And to develop and establish a foundation of security and priorities that reflect your values in very healthy ways. So being money grubbing is not the North Node in Taurus. That's a really cheap, poor badly evolved version of that, working on your value systems, right? Through the acquisition and use of your personal resources is absolutely your North Node in Taurus. Because your South Node here in Scorpio, you're coming from a previous lifetime where you were sharing your resources or you're relying on other people's resources for your survival. So in a previous lifetime, your money and other people's money were tightly mixed up and there was no separating the two. And or, here's what's interesting, and or, because Scorpio is all about power and the use and abuse of it, right? In previous lifetimes were also issues of power dynamics that were at play that were extremely complicated. And in this lifetime, you're learning to stand up for yourself with that North Node in Taurus, right? So it's no longer giving into your partners because your life depends on them, but finding a way to make space in your life so that you can stand up for yourself regardless of what other people, and in particular your partners, have to say about it. And I thought this was very interesting as it's coming up, this business with this marriage, and Jesus, what kind of weirdo dynamics that's about, right? Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting is his Chiron is with that South Node. So, and it's in his 10th house. So here's the thing, right? In this lifetime with that South Node conjunct the midheaven, and in Scorpio, it's absolutely perfectly descriptive of his role as a Supreme Court judge, being the highest court in the land, the ultimate authority, and literally having no one who will police him except his peers, because only the Supreme Court can police themselves. So that South Node with the Scorpio, it's all about power, and he's absolutely risen up into the exact replay of power dynamics from previous lifetimes. So it's all about status and power, status and power. That's what this job reflects, and this is exactly what that South Node on the midheaven is showing us he's not supposed to get lost in, right? The problem with your South Node is it's very easy. You've done it before, and it's very easy to get stuck there. We want to be where our North Node is. So we're like salmon. We have to constantly swim upstream against the easy current to get where we need to go if we're going to create a future for ourselves. Now, with Chiron here, with that North Node in that 10th house, this is a point, this is an Achilles heel for him. So, in many ways, the desire for authority and power and status is a huge evolutionary Achilles heel. He could easily go through his entire life enjoying the benefits of just pursuing power, money, status, right? He could absolutely go through his whole life enjoying all of these things and never actually doing his evolutionary work. The problem is what happens is as you go through in time, you find that these things have less and less appeal and satisfaction. And boy, you want to talk about a midlife crisis. Holy cow, this stuff is not fun. And then when you get to the end of your life, you realize that there's nothing there. You open the box and there's nothing inside. So with a Chiron there on top of it, it makes it extremely painful when this happens. So he must, if he's to get through this lifetime without screwing it up, he must, one, examine this desire for money, power, and status, but specifically power and status, which is going to be very difficult to do with this quincunx and this intercepted moon, right? And he must invest his energy into pursuing his North Node in Taurus, which is about establishing your values and priorities for yourself, unaffected by your partners. So you must be able to stand separate from your partners, not just financially, but also in terms of your values and the priorities and things that matter to you. So that is some pretty interesting stuff. All right, now let's get on with the show. So what was interesting is if you look at the transits in his chart, right, there would have definitely been challenges, really strenuous challenges, or marital problems between, especially highlighted between March and June of 2020. Now, I haven't had enough time to go back and research the timeline with public information that we have. So if you know something, please, by all means, let us know. I am curious to see if she was doing something that would have been particularly detrimental in that time, right? March, April, May, June of 2020. Now, come December of 2020 and January of 2021 is when this marriage would have reached a breaking point. So we're into 2022, just barely in 2022, and they're still married, but that does not mean that the marriage itself has not ended for all intents and purposes. So it will be interesting to see what was going on also as well December of 2020, January of 2021, because whatever was going on then would have literally brought this marriage to an absolute like breaking point. That was like literally the straw that broke the camel's back. And of course, everything at this point is all about, you know, him and how this is going to affect him as we move forward. So we'll see. If you can remember what was going on during those times with her or him, please put it in the comments section below, because I've got other stuff to do. I don't have time to do extensive research on these characters. So if you know something, please share. And this, my friends, is a snapshot of the tweet from Ginni Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas. This is her personal account that she sent out on the day that the riot and attempted coup of the democracy in the Capitol took place. She apparently has been instrumental in facilitating and helping these groups get down to DC for this. And apparently this tweet is nothing compared to what she posted on her Facebook, either that day or a couple of days before, that she apparently is taken down and hidden from everybody. And this, my friends, is why suddenly everybody's talking about Ginni Thomas and Clarence Thomas and their marriage. Is Ginni Thomas a threat to the Supreme Court? Behind closed doors, Justice Clarence Thomas's wife is working with many groups directly involved in controversial cases before the court. And the reason this is an issue is because there have been multiple cases that have been brought forth to the court where she has been involved, right, up to including some anti-abortion laws in a couple of states, where as a Supreme Court judge, he has been sitting in on making the decisions about, and he has not recused himself from these cases. He has not removed himself from these cases. And everyone knows there's no way you're not going to go home and talk about your work with your partner. I mean, unless you really hate your partner, then maybe, because you don't talk about anything. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're in a functional marriage, you're going to go home and you're going to discuss things with your spouse because you're trying to sort stuff out in your head and you need a sounding board, which means that he at some point, because it's human nature, would have gone home and discussed things with her just to sort of sort them out as a sounding board or how he feels about it, which remember, he has difficulty accessing his feelings anyway. And she, being participant and advocate for so many of these extreme, ultra-conservative, right-wing wackadoodle groups, absolutely would have his ear and the ability to sway him in one direction or another, right? And this is why this is a concern, because again, there have been multiple cases he has sat on instead of recusing himself, where she has actively been involved with the plaintiffs in the case. If you have time, I highly recommend you go look for this article and read it. It's amazing. This was from the New York Times, or no, sorry, the New Yorker. This is from the New Yorker. And if you look for this byline, or the journalist Jane Meyer, January 21st, 2022, you'll find the article online. Absolutely go read it. And here is Ginni. So Ginni is a Pisces. Now we think her moon is in Capricorn, but we don't have a time of birth for her. So her moon is either like maybe 1 degree Capricorn or 28, 29 degrees Sagittarius. So that moon, we've got some latitude here depending on what time of the day she was born. What we do know is that whether it's late Sagittarius or early Capricorn, she is still very much within orb of having a square to her natal Jupiter. So, and this is going to be important in a second. Now, so what can we tell about Ms. Virginia, and why on earth she would marry somebody who's obviously not anything in keeping with what her favorite social tribe believes is acceptable for marriage or anything else? So Virginia has the sun in Pisces. She's got Mercury and Venus in Aquarius. So and also Chiron is here as well. So in many ways, so that Pisces Aquarius combination, you'll often get people who see themselves as a bit of a social rebel, right? So they're not typically aggressive enough or strong enough or passionate about their convictions to really like overtly take a huge dramatic stance, you know, to fly in the face of convention. Like she's never going to get face tattoos, right? You know, or doing like the cult, the Moonies or something like that. Well, maybe. But certainly she'll do little things that show or say to that she will say to herself are representative of her independence. You know, because I'm such a progressive, you know, wild child. You know, I'm such a bad girl. Um, sorry. So that's what you get with a Pisces Aquarius thing. Now, typically with Pisces Aquarius, you get people who are much more given and devoted to causes of humanitarian nature. And she would probably say, if you asked her, that all these organizations she's involved with, you know, these MAGA supporting hateful ultra conservative organizations, she would probably say that these are humanitarian causes. But the thing that I would say to you is to keep in mind that Pisces often takes on the causes of the underdog. So Pisces will frequently, when they are when they are finally motivated to do something, rather than, you know, hide in the shadows and wait for it to go by, kind of thing, they will always be the ones who will champion the underdogs. Which means that anything she gets herself involved in, she's going to see as an underdog or a lost cause, which I thought was kind of funny. Listen, I don't make the rules, I just read the charts. Okay, now with this Moon-Jupiter square here, this Moon-Jupiter square makes her optimistic and sometimes a little less realistic. And, you know, it's all about the party, right? So she's always going to be attracted to things where she can feel like she's part of the group, part of the party. And being an ultra-conservative Nebraskan who's married to a very conservative Supreme Court judge, the only party that's going to have her, you know, and embrace her with big warm hugs are going to be other ultra conservative groups that need her access to his ear. You know, but you can't tell some people some stuff because they just don't want to hear you, right? Okay, so speaking of people not wanting to hear you, now let's take a look at this. Mercury, Venus, and Chiron all in Aquarius like this, around the middle degrees, right? These all square that Mars and Taurus. This is problematic because Mars and Taurus, as a rule, is very stubborn. They're slow to make up their mind. They're slow to do anything, but once they start doing it, man, they're like a freaking freight train, and you're not going to stop them. You cannot stop them once momentum has been initiated. So Mercury and Venus in Aquarius is also extremely stubborn. So she is very fixed in her ideas about anything. Once she's made an opinion about something, informed, ill-informed, you know, correct or inaccurate, doesn't matter. Whatever her final decision is on something, she will stick with it literally until the end of her days. If it's the last thing she does, she will go to the grave, you know, hanging on to that like a bulldog. So obviously this is good when you're championing a good cause, and obviously this is bad when you find yourself championing what you thought was a good cause. It actually turns out to be a big old poison pill. Because even when it's a big old poison pill, she won't let go of it. One of the problems or challenges with her, because Aquarius is a group sign, right, is that she will often stay with people and situations much longer than she should because she's so driven to be part of a group. Remember, she needs to be part of the party. And by the time she realizes what has happened, because Chiron, right? By the time she realizes what has happened or how far down the rabbit hole or sewer hole she's managed to slide into because she wouldn't get out sooner, it often is going to be to her detriment, right? So there is that. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I believe somebody mentioned, I think she may have mentioned, oh, that's LifeSpring. She was involved with a group called LifeSpring. Which is not a bad group, but, you know, with any group that has chapters, they'll kind of splinter off and do their own weirdo thing under your name. It's like having kids. They were fine when you were raising them. Once they leave the house, they still carry your family name, but they're living a whole different life. Anyway, that's LifeSpring. So, and she's described LifeSpring as what she thought was a cult later kind of thing, but I think it was just more predatory behavior by the people in the group she was with. But again, it's this thing about her, once she makes up a decision or an opinion about something, that's it, ill-informed, rightly informed, correct, inaccurate, whatever. She'll stay with it much longer than she should, because once you get momentum going, you can't stop it. So once she's committed to something, she's committed. Unfortunately, with Chiron here, it also usually guarantees and further reinforces, really emphasizes that when these things occur, they're often going to be extremely detrimental to her. So in this lifetime, with Chiron and Mercury and Venus together, one of the big challenges she has is to really examine her need for group acceptance. That's a big, big deal for her. Okay, now she has Saturn in Sagittarius. Okay, Saturn quincunxes Taurus, which again with this square, it's not helping, not helping, and I'll tell you why, right? So we have a square here, we have a quincunx here, Mars and Taurus, right? Mars and Taurus is stubborn and refuses to admit that they're wrong, or defeat or surrender any of that. So the problem is with Saturn and Sagittarius, she's a know-it-all. She needs to feel like the smartest person in the room. She needs to feel like she's part of the hip crowd. So whatever's really hot, hip, and happening, she needs to be there right at the front row. No matter how much you know, she knows as much or more. Like she needs to feel like she is, well, not at the top of her game, but there's a real issue with being a part of the in crowd as opposed to the in group as part of the out group, right? So she desperately needs to be part of the in group, and a lot of the currency that she will use in this lifetime with this particular combination is, one, being a know-it-all. She knows more than other people, and two, being, part of the in group, the it girl, that sort of thing. So belonging to a tribe, being where the party is, and being the party girl, the star of the party while she's there, is a very, very big deal for her, and a bit of an Achilles heel. So there is that, and we are certainly seeing that. What else we got here? The Sun. Well, she's got Sun Uranus quincunx, and she's got a Sun Neptune trine, which can make her very imaginative, or it can make her very crazy, or both. I suspect that we may be dealing with both at this point. But, that we'll see. We'll see. So some interesting sidebars. If you have a chance to look up Ginni, definitely look up her political affiliations. There's a whole lot of stuff coming out about her that's really interesting. And really, the more you read, the more you start wondering, like, why are she and Clarence Thomas married? And why is she still married him? And why are they putting up with this? Because the people she's supporting do not approve of interracial marriage. So interesting sidebar. She did not get married until she was 30. Clarence Thomas is her first marriage. And in case I didn't say it earlier, Clarence Thomas was his marriage was on the rocks when he met Ginni. And it wasn't much long after he met Ginni that he ended his marriage and then promptly married her, or moved in with her. So the grave wasn't even cold on the marriage when he got officially publicly involved with Ginni. If you're familiar with Spike Lee movies, this is a whole lot of jungle fever thing happening here, so blatantly and so obvious. Oh my God. So if you have time and you're interested, I highly recommend watching Jungle Fever, because Spike Lee does good stuff. And then overlaying the Clarence Thomas, Virginia Thomas marriage over top of that when it comes to him divorcing his wife and getting married to Ginni. Some interesting stuff. Also, I was looking at it, and at age 53 is when she finally made the step forward, because she couldn't get her own career off the ground because her husband was a judge. And typically in these situations, because they're in such positions of influence in policymaking, the spouses and partners of Supreme Court judges and senators will often step down from their position if there's a question of impropriety or things looking fishy. So, for instance, Senator Elizabeth Warren, her husband stepped down from a job he was doing with a company, a private company doing something or other, and went to teaching, because it would look very questionable that he is working for a private firm doing whatever, and his wife is a senator making policy decisions involving those things that this company does. A lot of the Supreme Court justices, the Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, even her husband, did something different. So there's a lot of that going on. And so apparently Ginni couldn't actually get anywhere because it would look inappropriate. But clearly the the lid's off the box for that. And at age 53, well into this marriage, she started her own lobbying firm for these ultra-conservative groups, while her husband is clearly a sitting judge on the Supreme Court. So that's interesting. And I'm not completely sure. And listen, I know this is going to sound sexist, but at 53, that's right about the time she'd have started having the menopausal breakdown, right? And so it's entirely possible that if she was a little crazy before, she was definitely crazy at this point, and just getting loopier and loopier, right? And listen, this is not a sexist thing to say, only because men go through it too, but earlier. Typically with men, it's their midlife crisis in their mid to late 40s when andropause starts kicking in and they start getting really freaking weird. And if you don't believe me, look at the politicians. George Bush is a classic example. As soon as their daughters become of the age that they're sexually active, these men lose their damn minds and start wars. That's exactly what W did. As soon as his daughters got caught drinking and smoking and messing around with Secret Service men, well, that we know of, cough cough. Next thing you know, he's driving us right into a war. I'm just saying, men go through it too. So maybe we should start electing either much younger politicians, or we should wait until all the hormonal hysteria is calmed down. And this isn't to say that everybody goes through this. I know many, tons of women who've gone through menopause, and they're perfectly sane, rational human beings. Literally, the worst that happens with them is they're a little bit more irritable, cranky. They're a little more cranky, and the sweats, right? The hot flashes. But every now and then you get somebody who just completely loses their crap. And the men are no better. There are many men who go through midlife, sail through beautifully. And, the andropause doesn't make them crazy, right? So the little Mr. Soft Serve ice cream happening does not mean the end of the freaking world and they've got to go compensate for it. But, it only takes one or two of these guys with their race cars and their Viagra to really make life living hell for the rest of us. I'm just saying. So it's a hormone thing, not a one thing. All right, so we're going to try and keep this video under 4 hours. So what's in a marriage? Let's take a look at the marriage of Virginia and Clarence. All right, now the most striking thing I found about this chart between them is they have a Chiron square. Holy cow, wow, that's big. So Chiron is a fairly new planet we started using, so we don't have a lot of information about it, but I do know that Chiron square is pretty big. And I know that in some more experimental forms of astrology, they say that Chiron has to do with marriage. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't agree or disagree, but it's there. So I used Chiron in here because I thought it was noteworthy. Now, they have a Chiron square. Obviously, his Chiron is here at 18 Scorp. Her Chiron is over here at 13 Aquarius. So this year, we have just a string of eclipses happening in Scorpio and Taurus. That means that he's going to get that eclipse activation right there on or in opposition to his Chiron, and she's going to get it by square. This is going to get colorful. So as far as the marriage goes, one could say that with a Chiron square, they hurt each other in the most deeply personal ways. I don't know how they managed to, well, I do know because I've seen the charts, but let me tell you, like in any other circumstance, you would really wonder how two people who are able to hurt each other so deeply are capable of staying married to each other. So, or why they would even get married in the first place. But listen, when it comes to your spiritual lessons, right? Oftentimes we can't see what we're getting involved with until after we're committed to it. Then we suddenly start finding out what the lessons in this marriage were all about. Now, Clarence's Chiron squares Ginni's Venus and opposes her Mercury. So the things that hurt Clarence most deeply, the things he's struggling to work through in this lifetime, her Mercury and Venus, her very value systems and her opinions literally are at odds with the things that hurt him the most deeply. And it is ironic or telling that her being a MAGA supporter and all the things that MAGA represents sound exactly like the things that would hurt him most deeply. As a black man in America with a college education, sitting on the high square land and still dealing with all this stuff. Because if you don't know who he is, he's still just a black guy, right? So I thought that was interesting. Now, Ginni's Chiron is opposing his Pluto. So Clarence's Pluto, now remember, his Pluto is with his chart ruler Saturn, right? And it opposes her Chiron. So in a lot of ways, his, I would expect, because his Chiron is right here, right? And her Chiron's over here. Get rid of this. I would expect that a lot of his controlling, overbearing behavior, which, it's not controlling and overbearing if you like that in your partner. So if you're a submissive woman or man, you want these qualities in your partner. You want your partner to be controlling and domineering and overbearing. That's what you like. That's what you're comfortable with. So I'm not saying this is a negative thing, but I will say in this particular instance, those very qualities that make him such a dominant partner in a marriage would also, for whatever reason, raise the hackles or really get her where it hurts her the most. So I'm not sure how that plays out between the two of them, but it is an interesting dynamic to take a look at. And also, too, remember, she's got all this Aquarius, right? So, she likes her freedom. She may be as submissive as the day is long, but she likes her freedom. She likes having her independence. She likes having her own identity. So being buried or suffocated underneath that Pluto with him may be the very thing that is so exhausting and trying for her. And that may be why we're seeing her get involved in these organizations as kind of a passive aggressive, thumbing her nose at him like, oh, F you, buddy. See what I can do? Because this is mine. You can't touch it. Never underestimate the ability of grown adults to be childish. So there's that. I thought that was interesting. But let's take a closer look at what's going on. And remember, these eclipses are gonna hit them both, kerpow, 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 all year long. If they're able to survive with these eclipses, if they're able to survive this year and stay married, I am going to be mightily impressed. Mightily impressed. Okay, so for those of you who don't have a time of birth, do not panic. It is not the end of the world. Remember, everything you need should come from the planets and the relationships or aspects that they have with other planets. We use a time of birth to find houses, and we use the houses to fine-tune the timing of events and the specific more narrow focus or expression of the planets. But ultimately, the meat and potatoes of the chart, the majority of the information that you need, absolutely should be coming from just the planets and their relationship or aspects to each other. If you're not getting the majority of your information from just that, then you're not really reading the chart and you're missing a whole lot of valuable information. So with this particular chart, this is called a synastry grid. Ginni's her planets are across the top, and we read this from top to bottom. So it would be, for instance, her Jupiter, right, trines Clarence's moon. Okay, Clarence, of course, is here. Okay, and his planets are read left to right. These are just the planets. Now, some things we should know is that we don't actually know where Ginni's moon is. It's, a couple of degrees one direction or the other. So for that reason, we're just going to kind of ignore this column because we don't know for sure where her moon is. I could leave it up, but just for brevity's sake, we'll leave it out. Now, what I've done is I've color-coded the chart. And what you're going to see is that anything, okay, with green is a positive or harmonious aspect. Anything in yellow is also a harmonious aspect. The red and the blue are harsh or irritating aspects. Now, in terms of compatibility, obviously you'd like more compatible aspects than not compatible aspects. So in terms of positive aspects, even without our moon, sorry, this should be 13. Right here, we've got 21, or sorry, 20. My math is awful. We have 20 positive planets, or relationships between planets, right? But here's the thing, and this is what's confounding me. If you look at the irritating aspects between them, or the thing, literally irritating, the things that irritate each other about each other, we have 28 of these. And this is completely leaving out her moon, which will tip this one way or the other. But I can tell you now, just by looking at this, it's going to make this number even higher. So if we actually had this moon close to where it should be, say she actually was born close to the moon, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 28 would then become 33. So if we had the moon in the correct position, it would be 33 versus 21, right? So if her moon is close to where it should be and she's born closer to noon, there's going to be 33 disharmonious or irritating aspects between them and only 21, right? Which is a huge uh, negative amount. We don't want that, not for a marriage. So if we take the moon away, what we're left still is 28 negative and 20 positive. This makes this relationship really difficult to sustain because they get on each other's nerves. But more specifically, if we look at this, it's actually, because remember, her planets go up and down, his goes sideways, right? So right here, okay, and here, here, like we see a lot of irritating factors. That's not the yellow, it's the blue. On his part. So in a lot of ways, I hate to say it, but she gets on his nerves, which really makes you wonder why he married her, right? So right there is a big red flag. Like this is not the best combination or partnership between people, and really makes you wonder what on earth were they thinking, right? So let's take a closer look at the marriage. When we look at these two, it's hard when we're looking at this, right? I mean, there's literally so much that doesn't make any sense on the surface. So from a professional, social, class position, there are certainly certain sociodynamics and economic issues and professional considerations that play into why Clarence Thomas would have left his wife and gotten married to this. And certainly why this woman, who's clearly a MAGA lover, and all their hateful racist stripes, would be married to a black man. I mean, if you're that much of a MAGA person, why would you have ever stepped out of, your social comfort zone and married somebody of a completely different race, knowing how horribly that's going to be received by the very people you consider your tribe? So again, there are things in this world I do not understand. So many things. So in any event, I mean, there are certainly some predictable reasons why Clarence would have done what he did. If you're not familiar with Spike Lee Productions and the movie Jungle Fever, I really encourage you to watch it. Spike Lee's he's a very good storyteller. The other is with her, like there's this thing, and I'm going to say some uncomfortable stuff, so don't hang me on a cross for this. This is not an unusual conversation. But I have certainly heard white women who have discussed the fact that because they don't fit into the models of beauty that white culture presents for them, that they have been forced to find partners outside of their race because that's the only place they could find someone who would appreciate them, and not see them as a disadvantage because they weren't something else, right? So the thing to understand is that with Virginia Thomas, she would have come of age, and coming of age means being in your 20s. Those are your ripe, optimal dating years, right? So she would have come of age in her 20s, which would have been right about the 1970s. Well, in the 1970s, folks, the model of white beauty for a woman was petite, slender, blonde, with a very young or pixie-ish kind of face. This was the 70s was the time of the rise of the supermodels, right? All legs, no butt, no breasts, just a stick figure with a head and legs. This was also at the end of the 70s was the original Charlie's Angels, right? Petite, slender, symmetrical faces, all this sort of stuff, looking like the girl next door. And it was very important that you looked as close to that as possible, to be considered foxy, right? Or Valerie Bertinelli, as a matter of fact, was in the height of her career at that time because she was the absolute girl next door, right? Clearly, Virginia was not any of these things. Virginia is tall, she is big boned, she's got a lantern jaw. Like she would have made a fantastic and very appealing potential wife for a lonely farmer in the 1800s that needed somebody to help him work the farm. But in the 1970s, she would have been as far removed from what's considered attractive by white culture standards as being a different race. So I have heard white women who often said that they have received better reception from black men or Spanish men, because they're not, even though they're not the standard of a white beauty, right? And that's why they started dating interracially. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm just saying that this may have been a driving force in Ms. Virginia jumping the fence into territory that clearly would not have been approved of or received well by the tribe she's coming from, right? Just saying. And clearly this is a tribe she understands and is warm and affectionate for, because she's supporting them again now, in spite of the fact that she is still married to somebody who is the exact antithesis of what they approve of on any level. So there's that. And with Mr. Thomas, there's this whole thing about we can't get into it here, but there is a very real psychosocial dynamic that has a lot to do with being a successful black man in the United States and, rising up the ranks and needing a trophy wife, right? And regardless of race, white or black, the idea is that a successful man at a certain level shows his success not just by his professional status, but also his partner. So the trophy wife, is the thing. This is why we hear all these stories about these men. They hit middle age, have a midlife crisis. They throw the wife out and get somebody, half their age, young enough to be their daughter as the new wife. Well, trophy wives typically, and this is changing. We are entering a new time. For all of you listeners who are under 30, you're entering into such a much better world. You have no idea. As messy as things are outside, it's a lot better than what we were growing up with. Oh my Lord. So with that said, you had to have a trophy wife. So for white men in white culture, the trophy wife was, whatever the model of beauty was. So you either had a supermodel wife, or you had a petite, slender, blonde wife. Typically the white blonde is the big thing with trophy wives of these guys over a certain socioeconomic class. But she also has to be young. So this is why you see a lot of older guys that have extremely young wives. They know these women aren't married to them because they want to be with them. These girls are married to an insurance policy and a bank account. Come on, we know what's going on. And they know too, and they don't care. They need a trophy wife. So for black men coming up in these particular environments, remember, this is very old school. I don't know what it's like right now for the younger generations, but certainly with that generation and older, if you are the anomalous black man who rose up the ranks to that level of money and class, you also had to have the trophy wife, which could not be a black woman. You had to have, of course, a white woman, preferably a blonde white woman, but definitely a white woman, because that would have shown that you have also arrived and you were also a member of that club, which happens enough or happened enough that Spike Lee made an entire movie about this. Many of us know this story, and this is probably what also contributed to Clarence Thomas taking on this woman to be his wife and still staying with her in spite of the fact that she supports the very groups that would like to see him dead. I'm just saying. So again, what would make a marriage like this stick? Well, the first thing, folks, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be with you for the rest of your life and will never leave you, Saturn trine Saturn. Saturn aspects are important for longevity. Strong Saturn aspects like a Saturn conjunction, a Saturn trine, Saturn sextile, but particularly conjunctions and trines. I guarantee you that marriage will last a lot longer than maybe you even want it to last. So if you're looking for lifetime commitments and you honestly don't care if the lifetime commitment involves half a lifetime of suffering because you just won't leave each other, Saturn trines are absolutely the gold star standard for longevity in a relationship. The other thing that these two carry, which is kind of interesting, is they have a Mars trine Mars. So the thing of the Mars trine Mars in a relationship is, and with them, they have the ability to operate in lockstep formation and get stuff done. They work better together than separately. So they have the smooth efficiency working together as a team, like a Navy SEAL team, right? So that's very good when your ambitions and goals are the same, because you'll be able to work together seamlessly to get the job done and get where you're trying to go. The challenge with these two, of course, when you look at like what are their goals and ambitions here, right? So they're both ultra conservative. They both have very regressive ideas about how the world is supposed to work. Anti-feminist, anti-equal opportunity, yada, yada, yada. But now, as they've gone on in years, they're splitting into more extreme, well, she's splitting into more extreme directions. And the whole MAGA thing is very concerning, right? But ultimately, at the root of that, somewhere along the majority of this marriage, they both had the similar goals, and their ability to work together to achieve those goals is what not only made the marriage work, but also made the marriage attractive for each other, that they stayed married. The final thing I'm going to say is that they have a grand trine in water. And with a grand trine in water, just like the grand trine in the marriage in water in the marriage chart of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, they have the ability to support each other in their own little tight little island of fantasy that they live on. There's your grand trine. And what that means is that whatever these ambitions and ideals and visions of the future and the perfect world are, they support each other in those fantasies, regardless of what's going on around them in the real world, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what those fantasies and visions are. So they reinforce each other in terms of their sense of purpose in life and their goals. And these are very powerful things when it comes to marriage. Very often we think we're getting married because we love somebody. But the reality is oftentimes it's hormones and impulse and, financial considerations or security needs or, pick a number of things, right? But the things that keep a marriage together and make it last are the ability to support each other's sense of purpose, the ability to work together, and the ease with which you're able to take seriously and maintain your commitments. All of these things that they have. So they may have the world's most unhappy marriage, but they're not going to leave each other, right? They'll just, like most rich people, and certainly rich people do it easier, they'll just find other ways to find your happiness that are not inside the marriage. And there's your food for thought. So why are they married? Well, they originally got married because a number of reasons. It fulfills certain needs and expectations socially and professionally for each other. Why they stayed married? Because they were able to easily work together to achieve goals and ambitions. Why they remain married is because, and why they don't completely hate each other is because they both support and reinforce each other's sense of purpose in life. And that's that. Everything else they're getting from outside the marriage. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now, this year, we've got these eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus that are hitting them both and not in nice ways. So we'll see if their marriage survives the rocking and rolling that's going to happen this year. It may not. But it will definitely be interesting to see how this plays out. Because at the end of the day, the direction that Virginia has steered herself into has everything to do with patronizing and supporting and championing the very groups that hate the very existence of her husband and people who look like her husband. And the fact that she's married to him makes the marriage weird. Nobody's really sure what's happening. But here's the thing I want you guys to consider, and I'm just tossing this out there because it was an interesting idea that occurred to me, right? If I were any other kind of woman and I were her, right? So I am championing a tribe because I'm a party girl. I need to be part of the party. I need to be an important, special part of the party. I need my tribe. I will not be alone. I must be a member of a group, right? A special group, which she now is. And that group hates my partner for everything that he represents. And they hate the fact that I'm involved with him and not one of the tribe. How am I going to get myself out of this when he goes? Because he's going to go. If they don't get him, time, nature, and life will. In old age, right? And I'm not going to be alone. So the problem is, because I'm a MAGA supporter, people who are not white, especially non-whites who are the targets of MAGA people, are not going to embrace me. They're not going to welcome me with open arms. So the only people I have left are the MAGA people I've been supporting and championing all this time. But the problem is, now that my husband is gone and I no longer serve a purpose for them, because the thing that made me valuable was my husband, right? And access to him and the things that he could do for them with me as the intermediary. Now that he's gone, I have no value. And I can't, and I won't be embraced by non-MAGA people, and the MAGA people have no use for me. So how am I going to get out of this? Because I'm not going to be alone. Like, are you crazy? Well, one could theoretically say that she could spin this and say that she's been, like, in her mind, I'm sure she sees herself as this, but she could play this as she's been some kind of Mata Hari, right? Some double agent spy, who was staying in the marriage to support the cause. She was literally continuing this marriage specifically and solely for the purpose of championing these MAGA people and their agendas, and that's why she was doing it. She would have left the marriage sooner if she didn't need to be there for them. And if she does that, it does a couple of things, because one, it gets her off the hook for voluntarily being in the marriage, because so you can say that you were young and stupid for doing something, but when you stay married for 30 years, the whole young and foolish choices doesn't wash anymore. You were there, literally, you are no longer a victim, you're a volunteer. So it kind of resolves that. And the other is that it buys her some sympathy. Oh my God, you did this thing just for us. Okay, well, we will forgive you. Right here, come, my child, we'll forgive you. We'll put that in the past and leave it there. The other thing that's interesting is, in all of that, what this will also do is potentially attract a partner once she's forgiven by the tribe and brought back into the MAGA fold after the husband is removed, the offensive object, who now is not there anymore. Therefore, she doesn't really have any value left. It could potentially attract a partner who's got some weird fetish with, black men and white women having sex, which apparently there's a whole big thing about that. That's just freaking weird. So there's some MAGA guy out there right now who's, just waiting for the opportunity to have this white woman who's been, despoiled by a black man, because that's what he gets off on secretly. Yeah, I could, if I were a different kind of person, and clearly white, not mixed, I could totally see how a woman, especially for that generation, could spin that and try to literally play it that way when her husband is no longer part of her life and she loses her value as a result of it. So the thing that mystifies me is how he doesn't see this. How do you not see this? Like, are you that blind? Well, remember, he does have the moon intercepted quincunxing those Cancer planets. And those Cancer planets, that Sun in Cancer, Venus retrograde in Cancer, these guys don't let go of anything. He's not giving up that marriage. Even after the marriage is over, he's not going to give up that marriage. So him leaving that marriage voluntarily is really slim to none. Like, it would have to be a freaking a nuclear bomb dropped on that marriage to get him to leave. Which could happen this year. It could happen, but even then, I think he's still going to try and stay married. So there's that. And the other thing is that moon is the blind spot. So not only does he have a big blind spot where his feelings are concerned, the moon also represents women in your life, and women also become part of this blind spot. So it's perfectly literally possible that he has a giant blind spot where she's concerned, and he just literally doesn't see it. It's like this hypnosis thing where literally something's right in front of you, but you're just not seeing it because your brain's not registering it. Right? They call it a negative hallucination. It's right there, but it's been wiped out from your mental processes. So even though it's physically in front of you, you're not seeing it because your brain's not interpreting it. So that may be what we're looking at here, which is kind of terrifying, right? So when she said, "Till death do us part," it's too bad that he doesn't realize that she was serious. I'm just saying. And this has been the Astrology Investigates for Clarence and Ginni Thomas. If you guys have any information about the activities of Miss Thomas during those time periods, or Clarence, or anything like that you want to add, please feel free to put them in the comments section. I'm totally open to discussion. However, I will warn you, I will not have snarky remarks in my comment section. So if you're a MAGA supporter and you're just here to try and start an argument, no. Just no. Nobody has time for that. And you guys have your Parlor boards or Reddit or whatever else you're on to, like, vent the spleen over there. I'm not getting involved in that. Not interested, not welcome here. Okay, so, and then finally, of course, my friends, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button and let me know. Give me some feedback. If you'd like to get notification of other videos as they come up, please remember to click the subscribe button so you are notified. And if you think you know somebody who might enjoy this or find something humorous in this video, or telling, ooh, you're more than welcome to share this with someone else. So that's it. We're not out of January yet, and the year is just going to get amazing. Ooh-wee, but amazing in very, very different ways than we've had to deal with the last couple of years. So we're on the upswing. Hang in there, kids. Hang in there. And that's it, and we will talk to you guys later. Bye.